I'm Nolan Beilstein, and welcome to another episode of Gen Z in Manufacturing, a podcast where I interview young people about their journeys in manufacturing, how they intend to influence the industry, and what they are looking for from an employer. For this episode, I welcome Josiah Bondy, a 29-year-old senior product marketing manager for MITRE, a software developer that helps construction and field service contractors manage their workforce and field operations. Bondy holds degrees in communication and digital arts and business administration and previously spent nearly 5 years at Fulcrum, where he worked closely with shops to upgrade tech stacks and apply AI. Before we hear from Bondy, please make sure to like and share this episode of Gen Z in Manufacturing. To view previous episodes, visit manufacturing.net. If you are a member of Gen Z and would like to discuss your experience in the manufacturing industry, please get in touch with me, Nolan Beilstein, at nolan@in.com. Okay, Josiah, well, thank you for joining Gen Z in Manufacturing. You're kind of a unique guest here because you work with companies that do manufacturing art, but you don't have any direct manufacturing experience yourself. So as someone who falls into that category, what surprised you most about the manufacturing industry?
Yeah. First of all, I want to say I feel kind of like an imposter on this podcast.
No.
I'm coming from the tech side, but I feel kind of ashamed to say this, but I think a lot of people entering the industry probably would have a similar sentiment of just not realizing how important manufacturing is, how many things are made, everything's made, and it starts with manufacturing, and so I was just surprised by the level of quality in things I interact with in my everyday life, and didn't realize, a SpaceX rocket ship has, maybe 4,000 suppliers, and they're not big shops around the country. A lot of them are like small shops, 100 people or less, making like extremely precise components for those rocket ships. And somehow it all needs to be coordinated to hit these launch dates and targets to go to the moon. And so, the biggest surprise for me was these headlines I heard on the news, and targets that our country's working towards rely on small distributed shops all around the country, including in places that I grew up.
I think manufacturing insiders, people who have been in the industry for a long time, can sometimes normalize their operations. They don't realize what they're falling behind in and what they need to keep up on. Which parts of the industry do you feel like haven't kept up with the times?
Manufacturing has adopted technology faster than most other industries historically. They were one of the first industries to use software back in the 70s and 80s, like computer technology. And so that was the rise of the early like ERP was back then. But I think the shift, it's gone more towards machine technology since, CNC machines replace manual lathes and milling. And now you have 30 kilowatt and 40 kilowatt lasers. And so I think what's happened is you've seen a shift from investing in software to coordinate the operations of an actual manufacturer, and more towards the capabilities of the machine. And that's important. It allows them to make way more precise parts. Different axes allow for different types of parts, faster production. It's really, really important. But software, Silicon Valley has kind of looked towards other industries for investment until kind of recently, where now it's like, okay, there's a lot of coordination happening up and down the supply chain from those, small job shops to all the way to the big OEMs. And there's just a lot of opportunity to make what is a really complicated coordination problem a lot simpler so that shops can focus on actually making better parts.
What disconnects do you notice between those software companies and manufacturers?
Yeah, coming from not a manufacturing background, I was just shocked how much paper is used and spreadsheets when I came into manufacturing, and thinking about how many jobs exist to essentially enter data that was written manually on the shop floor. And so that's one of those gaps where it's like, you have these extremely high tech OEMs iterating on new rocket ships and on planes and on trains and all these incredible, um, you know, just futuristic goals that we have. And yet, like, it's routing down a lot of times to a spec, a tolerance written on like a piece of paper. And so there's just a lot of inefficiency getting that information back and forth. That if that was more efficient, making rocket ships would be faster. And I don't know many people that I've talked to in manufacturing that just, nerd out on process, or at least on uh, ordination. Like most of the time, it's on the craftsmanship and making incredible parts. Um, so that's been just I guess something that continues to be like blaring to me is like, wow, there's so much happening on paper that could be happening with like good software that would bridge that gap.
Do you have any examples you can tell of where you saw disconnects show up in practice?
I guess, one really specific disconnect is I'm thinking about aerospace shops a lot right now. And there's seems to be a disconnect between like engineering and quality and production a lot of times, where you have information being handed down from the OEM on the specs needed to build a part, and sometimes they're not always like passed to the person actually scheduling it, or the person actually like creating the part in a way that like makes sense. There's just so much communication happening, and production and quality have kind of been like siloed in their own thing. When in reality, like they should be complementary, right? Like quality is making sure that the parts being produced in production are meeting specs, and so that's like a disconnect that I think I've seen just in the last several months because of visiting a bunch of aerospace shops.
What have you learned about just the craftsmanship that's involved in the manufacturing industry by being close to shop floors?
I think the word precision has a way deeper meaning when you watch somebody make a part on a Swiss machine. Or you think about that part is that little piece is going inside of somebody's ankle, or something, helping somebody's heart still beat. Like it's a level of precision that's like really, really difficult to understand. And it's so valuable, so tactile. Like the work that's being done in these small shops, across the towns that I grew up in, they're literally saving people's lives. But I would have thought of the inventor, as the person who, made that thing possible. They did in a way, but it's the people who are meeting those really, really tight tolerances that are continuing to make it possible.
How do you think that companies could better broadcast these remarkable things you're talking about, like all these suppliers going into a spaceship or a piece that goes in someone's body to save them? How can companies reach those people with possibly a dormant interest in manufacturing and help them realize more of what the industry has to offer?
I think that's a really difficult thing to get anybody to think about. I think it requires the general public to care. And I don't think you're going to win everybody, but there are people who care about design and craft that I think would naturally be drawn to it if there was more um, just storytellers explaining like how things are actually made. I think of one of my favorite podcasts is it's about like architecture, infrastructure, and design, and they just talk about how everyday things are made and decisions were made. For example, like curb cuts on a street corner. Like, they used to just have it drop down from the sidewalk onto the street, and now, there's ways for people with wheelchairs and to make it up and down on the sidewalks. But like, I would have never thought about that if somebody didn't tell that story. And I don't know who's responsible to do that for manufacturing. It could come from a lot of different places, but yeah, that's more of what I think could change that. And you have, how it's made and different shows in the past who have done parts of it. But yeah, there's just so many stories. There's so many people in manufacturing, so many stories. And yeah, I wish people knew a little bit more about how the things that they're using every day and looking at actually like get made.
So you're a content marketing person. You are kind of a storyteller yourself. Say you're working with a major manufacturer and they want to get their message out. What kind of advice are you going to give their execs to tell their story?
I think just reminding, like you said earlier, I think a lot of people kind of, it becomes normal to them, the work that they're doing. I would just remind them that it's not. Like that to people outside of the industry, the work they're doing is really special. the amount of and manufacturers do take pride in it. The amount of shops I've been to that have a part sitting on the wall that they're like, oh, this this went into this spaceship, or a version of this went into this spaceship, or this is a part of a display that's in every Target across the country. Like they are doing that, but for some reason it's just, I don't know if it's just you get tired of telling the same story. But that's the type of stuff that I think if more kids, if the younger generation understood the amount of cool things that are already happening in manufacturing, maybe they'd get a little more on board. Um, so yeah, it's just probably remind them to keep telling them their story, keep telling their stories, and take whatever opportunities given to them. There's plenty of news outlets covering this stuff. There's people like you telling stories, and just keep it up.
Going back to the software side of things, where do you think Gen Z can fill some of these communication gaps between software developers and manufacturers to reassure the people on the production side that software is going to support their expertise and not replace them?
For me, manufacturing is so physical, it's hard to imagine that it's going to be replaced anytime soon. I think you've had years of robots like starting to replace some things, but the kind of like wave of AI technology today that is actually starting to displace a lot of tasks doesn't apply as directly to manufacturing, because you still need somebody to make the part. And also these LLMs, so think about Anthropic's Claude or OpenAI's ChatGPT and stuff, they're trained on publicly available data. So there's just all of that like institutional and tribal knowledge that manufacturers have built up over time generally isn't publicly available. You can't look up how to make a rocket ship online. And so I wouldn't say like, don't worry about it. Things aren't going to change. I would treat it more like, okay, it's, you're going from a manual lathe to a CNC lathe now. You're going to have to change. But there's a lot of opportunity to do more with the same people and machines that you have because of software, but even more so right now than just software, AI technology. So I would just say, embrace it as an opportunity more than let fear, stop you from feeling like you're valuable.
What a perfect transition you set up for me. I was going to ask about AI next. What are some common misconceptions about AI in manufacturing?
One common misconception, by nature, these LLMs, which stands for large language model, but just AI tools that you use every day, they're probabilistic by design. Which what that means is that you're not going to get the same answer every single time you ask something. And I think a lot of people see you get something wrong once or twice, and then they just are like, oh, no, that doesn't work. I'm not going to use it. But I think that's a mistake. I think you should treat it a little bit more like it's an intern or like a new employee at the shop. You don't expect, like, humans are probabilistic. We don't, if you ask me the same question twice, I'm not going to give you the same answer twice. And you might have to fact check some things I say. I'm going to do my best, but at the end of the day, like, I'm not going to be 100% right. I've probably said something wrong on this podcast. And so I would just encourage them to be more open-minded, and to recognize that the pace at which these are getting better is extremely fast. So that's one part. I think the other part is, just because AI itself is generally probabilistic, it doesn't mean that it can't produce something that's deterministic. And what I mean by deterministic is it's specific and accurate and always the same. Like, you could ask it the same question over and over again. AI tools right now, like Claude Code, are changing technology extremely fast because it's making it a lot easier to write software. I don't know. It's not that it's necessarily a misconception, but I think this is one of those waves where everybody needs to be paying attention and thinking about, what's the setup in my shop, to be able to take advantage of this new frontier. Yeah, and I don't know. Personally, I'm just excited for manufacturers to be able to focus on making better parts, faster, higher quality parts. And I don't think AI is that's not gonna take anything away from that. It's just gonna allow people to stop, pushing paper and copying and pasting things and start making the parts that make the innovation that we all want.
Would you say that tech companies are building for manufacturing, or are they forcing manufacturing to adapt to them?
That I think, and again, outside perspective here, but I think it's been the latter of forcing manufacturing to adapt to them a lot in the past. We've always said that that's like our nightmare. We are not manufacturers. We love manufacturing and we talk to manufacturers every day, but we're technologists and we want to solve the problems that manufacturers actually have, not just say, oh, this technology exists. What can I go do with it? That's where the relationship to our users is so important, is building on the feedback and problems that they explain, but also where it might require them to shift a little bit is a lot of times our customers might be like, oh, you know what, I have this problem, and they look at it this single way because they only have their context as an individual organization. And so it's not us prescribing what the solution is, but it's opening the conversation to saying there might be a different perspective than what you're thinking about to solve the same problem that you have. And that's how these other companies are doing it. And so this is the tooling we're going to build around it. So it's kind of like a collaborative effort, I would say, versus us wanting to like push our ideas into manufacturing.
Thank you for watching Gen Z in Manufacturing. Please make sure to like and share the episode. To view previous episodes, visit manufacturing.net. If you are a member of Gen Z and would like to discuss your experience in the manufacturing industry, please get in touch with me, Nolan Beilstein, at nolan@in.com.